Hungry Trilobyte podcast would like to start by acknowledging SoonerCon. Join us for Oklahoma's premier pop culture convention. SoonerCon returns June 20th through 22nd, 2025. This will be the 33rd year for SoonerCon, and this year will bring even more cosplay, celebrity guests, kids' workshops, gaming, comic art, and after-hours events. Visit SoonerCon.com for details.
On tap today, we have Chris Sahloff. How you doing today?
Good, good. Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad to do it. Okay, you are the brain behind a certain title called C.R.I.T.
Yes.
C.R.I.T. And I'm looking over this and I'm realizing that to me, it feels like one of those comics that is almost an everything but the kitchen sink concept.
Yeah, kind of.
Now, don't let me put words in your mouth, but it came about as a result of some D&D that you guys were putting together, a D&D type game. You just went overboard on building your own characters and actually evolved it into its own comic line.
Yeah, so we've been playing D&D.
Mhm.
Hadn't played as a group in about 10 years. And I had so much fun with the guys on the first game that I just started kind of sketching. And I didn't I wasn't an artist prior to any of this. I could doodle and make things that could be somewhat legible, but I wasn't really I wouldn't call myself an artist. And I was so inspired by what we had been playing that I just started getting into drawing and getting into being an artist. And the first real quote unquote comic that I created was just something kind of fun for me and the guys. It wasn't something that I thought would turn into this for instance. I just kind of thought it would be us hanging out, maybe drawing some stuff for fun and moving on. But we're actually, this is our fifth year and we're looking at nine comics, so it's definitely snowballed into this bigger thing.
And I'm looking at this, and the art is legit. I mean, this is
Thank
good
you.
art. So for your self-taught,
Hmm.
obviously this was the reason you taught yourself.
Yes.
What was the learning curve like? How long did it take you?
uh so in the very beginning, yeah, I thought I was good. I looked at it. I was very, very proud of the work. And as I to give myself credit, anybody that puts a lot of time into something, you should be proud of it. But I showed it to, I was married at the time. And I showed it to my wife. And prior to this, her and I had been best friends for like 11 years before this moment. So we were married for like 4 years, I think, at this point. So 15 years around her. And she's a phenomenal artist. We're not married anymore. I'll still give her the credit. She's a phenomenal artist and was a huge inspiration for me to start drawing. So when I showed it to her, we had been watching TV. She pauses the TV. She skims through this book that I had worked on for about 3 months and hands me my tablet back and turns the TV back on and says, "It's okay." Now, um, to most people, saying it's okay after 3.5 months or however long I worked on it may be okay. But knowing her that long, I knew that it was something that wasn't very impressive. And I didn't really have my feelings hurt, but I just turned around the next day, went and bought an iPad and started drawing again. And I said, well, if I'm just okay and I want to be good, then help me get good. And so I just started sketching and sketching and sketching. And every time I draw something, she'd come over and like erase something or move, cross things out, tell me something was wrong. My mother-in-law, she's an art teacher, so she got in on it. This should be turned this way, this pose is like, just learning. And I had zero ego because I knew I had no idea what I was doing. um and they were very talented people, so I just listened to everything they said. And for about 2.5 years, just under 3 years, every page it would go through. My ex-wife, would look at it, give me feedback. And I was working on my fifth issue, And I walked in one night and I showed her a page, and she looked at me and she said, "I don't think you need my help anymore." Um, and her and I are still friends. So, I tell her to this day that I will probably never forget that moment where she's like, "Yeah, you don't need my help anymore." It was pretty awesome. So I guess that took me just about 3 years to get to a point where I felt comfortable. And now I have a friend of mine, Robert Nix, who does a lot of cover work for me and other things. Um, he'll critique some of my work. Um, he gives me a lot of feedback on the art, and similar to her, I'll send him, a page that I'm working on, and he'll send me an image back with red marks all through it, and I'll continue to fix it because I want to continue to grow as an artist, and I want to learn more, and I want to produce the best books I can for the people that read this story, because um I'm still kind of shocked every time somebody says they like a certain thing, because this is just a story written by me and my friends playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like, we don't put all these hours of editing and you know like a typical writer would spend months sometimes writing a script, and then an editor would come in after a month and send it back. That's not really how it's written. Everything you see and read in the comic book happened at the table. It's recorded, and I transcribe it, and I storyboard it, and I turn it into the comic book. So while there is a lot of work that goes into it, I don't try to take away from those people who literally will sit for months and write a script and rewrite a script and rewrite a script. Like, I like to keep it as close to our tabletop game as possible, because I really want you to experience the story as we played it.
That's fascinating, and I really want to talk about the writing aspect of this too, but I can't get my head around your approach to the art, because there's so many people out there who will put everything they have to something when they're just starting out. They get that first bit of less than 100% affirmation, and they're like, my feelings are hurt too much, I have to quit. Or, you suck and I suck and we all suck. And this is and you didn't do that. You said, okay, I'm headed in the right direction. I'm not where I want to be, but how do I get from here to there? And I would say 9/10 of the people in that position never have that conversation with themselves.
I would probably agree with you on that. But so I was a professional musician for 6 years prior to well, not prior to this, but in a past life, I was a professional musician. Um, and when I joined my first band, I told them that I knew how to play guitar, and I didn't. I just really wanted to be in a band, and I knew a couple of the guys, so I got this audition, and I showed up, um, and I didn't know how to play, so I just hit as many cool sound. I I said I didn't know how to play, but I played guitar. I had messed around with it. I knew enough to BS my way into it, and that's what I did. Uh, I just literally hit a bunch of strings and put the distortion pedal on and made it sound really heavy, and they were like, "Okay, cool, you can join." Um, and after the first practice, the other guitarist walked up to me, and him and I, over about a month of hanging out, had become kind of friends. And he's like, "You don't really know how to play, do you?" I said, "Nope, not at all." And so we spent every day at least 2 to 3 hours a day practicing and learning. And so I just kind of take that same mentality here. And he was brutal when him and I are still friends, but he was very brutal, because I joined his band, and we wanted to play shows, and we wanted to do all these things, and arguably me not being able to play would hold us back. And so every day it would just be, "Nope, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong." And if it's something that you really want to do and you're really passionate about, you can't have an ego, and you can't get your feelings hurt. You just have to continue doing it until you do it right.
Completely agreed. Completely agreed. So to get to the writing aspect a little bit, you say it's it's part of your tabletop game. That was the gist of it. That's what you consider your source material. And I'm
Mhm.
looking through this, and I read some of the sample pages, and there is some lore here.
Yep.
It is fairly deep lore, and I think I would do a disservice to try to summarize it when you're sitting right here and could tell it. So if you would give like the your pitch, your spiel, your trailer of what you say the story's about.
So at its core, it's a story about friendship because it is just a bunch of friends going through this experience of gaining superpowers together and navigating a world that has to now react to having superpowered beings in it. That's the story at its core. What we're coming to Kickstarter this Wednesday, 3 days from recording. Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, we're launching the newest issue called "He Who Would Be King," and it's finally I'm able to really say that this is a modern Arthurian tale with a superhero trope. Yes, we have superheroes in it, but we've used a lot of Arthurian lore in it to get to this point. And we talk about lore and those things. Issue 8 is a lot of world building, a lot of answering questions, creating questions, but at its core, it will always be a comic about friends and their experiences as heroes in this world. Um, if I were to give any uh like titles, I would say if you're a fan of My Hero Academia, The Other Guys, and I love this one, but Police Academy, that's where we fit in. It's a lot of tongue in cheek, it's a lot of meta, and it's a lot of puns because it's just a bunch of friends having fun. And some people close to me have said it's like my version of the movie um, Tag, because this got my friends and I back together after 10 years of not playing games. And we've been playing now since 2019. So we're going on 6 years of consecutively playing, tabletop games together because of how much fun we had playing Crit.
That is really sweet. I love the idea, and the fact that you threw Police Academy in there right at the end. That is just the extra little je ne sais quoi that because I see so many independent comics, and I'm so glad I see so many independent comics because I love the fact that people like you and I can put our heads down, do the work, and put something out there into the world when there's so many giant corporate comics, and I love those too, don't get me wrong, but the fact that you and I are not cut out of the game is great. And then you have something that sets it apart, like, yeah, I want a little bit of 80s screwball comedy in there. I want to have something that tickles you a little bit. That is really cool.
Yeah, there's every issue there's something that just sticks out to us from when we were playing. Um and it's in the book, and there are some situations where I know we probably find it funnier than others. But I'll be honest with you, that doesn't bother me because this isn't, at the end of the day, I treat it like music. I started making this for my friends. So if my friends like it, then I'm doing something right. Now if they hated it and I'm doing it wrong because it should do a service to them. They're the ones that really, they were these characters, they are these characters. And so issue 4, I always talk about this because um issue 4 has a page in it, a couple pages, where they're riding off to investigate this this thing that's happened. Someone's attacking this gun store, and they say we need music. They need to like come into a song, and they're arguing. And this actually happened at the table. So at the table when we're riding into combat in their hero van, um, they were trying to figure out what to play, and everyone just kept taking out different songs on YouTube and putting it on the table, and so we never really had a set song. So when we go to actually work on the book, we're scripting it, and how we script is I just open up Discord, we open up a Word document, and we listen to the recording, and we kind of put it all together. Well, we still couldn't agree on a song. So when we're doing it, I'm like, well, let's just move on. So I put in brackets, insert song for everywhere that this song title would be. We just put that there, and we worked on it for about 3-4 hours, and we called it a night. Came back the next day, and before we did any more script writing, we did a read through, and we forgot about insert song. So we get to this part, and all of a sudden it's like insert song, and we just start dying laughing at the fact that like we still hadn't agreed on a song title. And I said, well, let's just keep it, because if we're laughing that hard, someone else is going to find it funny too. And it gives the reader a chance to put their song name there. And they're even arguing about the song in the book, like, oh, we need to play this song. No, like that song is not that good. And then one guy's like, I don't even know what that song is, and they're like, that song is like a musical masterpiece. And it's just this fun little debate between characters. And to me, it was just this moment for us to laugh, and because we're so indecisive on it, and then the reader to also have a chance to kind of put their song in it in their head and laugh with us. That still is probably one of my favorite parts. And in issue 5, we have a part where Boulder tries to infiltrate the enemy base by rushing in, and he doesn't feel good, so they give him food, and he starts eating their tacos, and now all of a sudden the tacos are bad and they're making his stomach hurt worse, and he's screaming, if the cream is sour, do not devour. And I will tell you, for about 2 years, we had that one in the back of our head, because it took me 2 years to really get to that book. And we still laughed as hard as we did the day he said it, because it happened at the table. And those moments are just so much fun, and so fun to like see come alive. And then when people reference them after reading it, I had a friend of mine who told me, I was reading the book and I hit this part and it made me laugh so hard I just threw the book across the room, like, how do you do that? And those are just like those moments that kind of stick out to me, like we're doing something right when we're writing it for us. So
Well, you're writing it for yourselves, and
Mhm.
that's valid, but you're writing it for people who play D&D, people who like comics. You're not writing it for, I mean, the type of people you're writing for is a very broad audience. There's a lot of people out there who dig this stuff, who get this kind of humor. An in-joke becomes a meme when a lot of people would get the same joke even if they weren't there.
Yeah, I love going to, so issue 7 just shipped. Um, and I have to read this. So we did a read through on issue 7 before I finalized it for the printer. And on the second to last page, um, we a good majority of the players in the book also play a game called Helldivers, and in it it's an ongoing, it's like a tongue-in-cheek video game, loosely like similar to Starship Troopers. So it's a lot of political satire, things like that. But the ongoing joke is like, do it for liberty, it's all for liberty. And there's a in the end of the book, one of the characters is asking for an energy drink, and another character goes, well, I don't have any energy drinks, but how about a cup of liberty? And he takes out his grenade launcher and starts blowing up this exit, because like the enemy's coming after him. And we got to that part, and this book is so filled with meme worthy jokes that we actually had to have an editor's note that says, please forgive us for all the memes. That is all. Now back to your regularly scheduled content. And we even acknowledge that we have like so many memes in the book, but like that's just who we are and how we play. Um, and so like I love how meta we can be. I love, you talk about indie comics. I love the freedom to just kind of do whatever we want and not worry about somebody saying, oh, we don't want that in the book, let's put something else, because it's not about what somebody else wants, it's about what we want. um when people read this book, we want them to not just experience our story, but really experience our characters. If you play D&D, you put a lot of time and effort into your character, and these characters are based off of my friends. Like when they came to the table the first time, I said, the situation you're in is you're at work and you gain superpowers. What do you do? So, you know, these characters are really them, their personalities, their decisions. They're not role playing them as an orc character that they built this backstory for. They're role playing themselves in all these situations. So when you say, man, I really like Boulder, he's funny, or I like Spectre because he's so laid back, whatever character you like you're liking that person. And it does carry some weight in it. And there's been moments where I've gotten phone calls from my friends and they're like, man, I was having a bad day, but you sent me this fan art of my character and it just made my day better. Like that stuff you can't get elsewhere.
And I was actually wondering earlier on, I'm glad you brought that up, that if every character did have an analog to one of the players, and clearly that's the case, I'm really wondering, has there been a moment where in the writing of this, somebody has had to say, whoa, that wouldn't actually happen. My character wouldn't say that, do that, or would think that way.
Uh there hasn't been that because I have the recording, so I have receipts for everything they've said. Um, but there has been moments where someone said, "Oh, I want to change that," or I didn't. I've had that moment where they're like, "I didn't say that," and it's like, "Well, let me pull this recording up." Yes, you did. It's usually like something stupid, and some of those moments where they wish they would have said something else. If it makes sense in the writing, then we'll change it. Like, or if they said something that doesn't make sense to the flow of the story, we'll edit it. But we'll call them, or they're just on the Discord chat with us, and it's like, well, what could we say that, what would you say here to match what's going on? Because if you played D&D, sometimes you just have players that say stupid stuff just to say stupid stuff. Um, what's fun is though all of my players kept pretty tight to the role play, didn't interject. Like you always have the one person who's kind of like inappropriate for no reason,
Yes, you do.
and it it was kept to one character, and it was more like your creepy uncle that says like just the most outlandish stuff. um you know like there's actually an issue 4. The guys are meeting up and discussing some of the things they've uncovered, and Reach, who is like the creepy uncle character, he's like, "Oh, I sent all this info in the group chat." And this actually happened at the table. We were talking about something else, and Obi was like, "Oh, I sent that in group chat." And Austin's like, I left the group chat after you sent all that tentacle porn, because he sent like this just absurd, octopus picture. And I won't go into the detail, but it was pretty graphic. And all of us were like, "Why did he send this?" But it's Obi, and he likes that shock value sometimes, just to see your face when he shows you something just completely outlandish. And Austin, who is the character Spectre, literally left the chat right afterward. And so in the book, you hear them arguing over, how Reach does stupid stuff like that. But it plays to the character, and it doesn't take you out of the element like some things. Um, and they really, like, I think I started putting the comic book out maybe 5 games in, 6 games in, is when I really started first working on the comic. And once they figured out that everything they were going to do was going to be published, they really like played hard to that character and made sure that things that they said were appropriate for the character and within that character's like realm of alignment and stuff.
So if somebody, because I'm sure after listening to this, there are going to be people like, I've never done a D&D character as myself, because the idea of creating your own character is so built into the role-playing genre
Mm-hmm.
that you want to be, an orc or an elf or all the things that you can't be in the real world, that sometimes people just don't think that I could just be me, just plain old me. And I used to do an RPG where I was a Star Trek version of myself, but even in that, I had to make differences between myself in the real world and myself in there. If somebody were to just say, you have to be you, and then suddenly you have superpowers, I'd never even thought of that. And what kind of advice would you give to somebody playing that or DMing that from the start?
Oh, well, I will say this: my at the time, we hadn't role played in like 10 years, and we last time we had played was D&D 3.5, and we were playing a homebrewed version of 5th edition, and so I knew people would have to learn the rules. And for players, it's very intimidating, especially if they don't know the rule set, to also have to learn the character while you're learning the rules, and balancing both can really take you out of the element. So to make it easy, that's what I said was like, hey, we haven't played in a long time. Um, why don't we make these characters versions of you? That way you don't have to role play. You just have to be yourself in the given situation. And that really worked. So I think for new DMs, it's easy too. New players, what would you do if you were an orc? Like all your experiences, all your personality, like you don't have to change anything about you. You just might be big, or whatever, however you picture your orc. That makes role playing more accessible and so much easier to kind of grasp, especially when you're learning rules and learning even if you're in a new group. I say role playing is a very vulnerable situation because you're saying and doing things at a tabletop with pen and paper and dice in front of you, and not everybody's going to be comfortable with being that wizard or being that warlock, whatever version of D&D you play. Taking out some of that uncomfortableness and just making it you makes it a little bit easier. It makes you comfortable at the table. It makes the game flow that much better. And so I would say for DMs, if you have a new player, toss them that idea like, hey, you are this, you're this person. If you're a player new to the game, learning the rules, maybe just not try to make the most intricate, crazy backstory ever. Just say, hey, this is me. Here's I was, however you were raised, and just transpose that onto your character. That way you're not always having to go back and say, what would this character do? You just say, what would I do? Now, don't
That
say that to me because I do that a lot. And I played a game a couple years ago where I was a ranger, and I personally I'm fascinated with vampires and werewolves. I've always loved that lore. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna make this character and I'm just gonna play me as this character. And the first thing, we're walking through the woods and I hear werewolves off in the distance. So what do? I run to a pack of werewolves and I immediately die. So case in point, in real world, if I run to a pack of werewolves, I'm just gonna run towards it and probably die.
that that tracks. There was a situation several years ago, and this might be a great basis for a D&D game of some kind at some point. But I live in Oklahoma, and about just under 10 years ago, we had something called the Tiger NATO. And the what happened was, and the details aren't important, but there was a story on the news that during a tornado, a local zoo had been damaged, and there were tigers running loose in the streets during the tornado.
Oh wow.
The facts of the matter were actually different, but we didn't know that at the time. And I just said to myself, if I see a tiger in my yard, I'm going to pet it. It's the last thing I will do, but I'm going to pet it.
I mean, I can't blame you. I'd probably do the same thing.
Yeah, it's like I have a chance to pet a tiger. Yeah, okay. This is how I go. I'm okay with that.
I said that to someone recently too. If I die for unknown causes, I probably ran into a wild cat somewhere.
Yeah. And see, and that's you know what you would do. That was the point I was getting at.
Yep. Yep. You know
And,
yourself better than you know a character you've never played.
mm-hmm. And it's you can't really lie about that. And when you have friends with you who know you as well as these friends of yours apparently do, they can hold you accountable.
Yes. Very much so.
Mm-hmm. Which it becomes a therapy is probably too strong a word, but it becomes a bonding experience. It becomes a meta bonding experience.
Oh, completely. You know, one of the players, the character of Bones, he's prior to this game, he knew me pretty well. He didn't know everybody though. When he first joined, he knew Brad, who plays Caliber. He knew him a little bit, but none of us were really close friends with him. And now we've been playing this game for this long, and it's like we're all pretty close friends. We talk on the regular, we hang out, we go to birthday parties together. Some of us knew each other prior to this, and it was like rekindling those friendships. Um, so it's kind of really cool to see us build our bond as as D&D players, um so through D&D it's kind of like built friendships and you know brought friendships back together.
So, and you said you'd gotten back into D&D after being away from it for a while. Prior to that break, how long had you been playing?
Well, I never stopped. I just stopped playing with these guys.
Oh, okay, okay. Gotcha, gotcha.
Actually, so the guy who is Caliber, Brad, him and I have been playing since, really. I mean, like I think we had a couple years where we didn't really play. But I've never really taken off much from D&D. I've always enjoyed role playing, and stayed with it. Terrell and the other guys, they had about a 10-year gap in between.
Mhm. Fair, fair. Okay. This is such a cool idea that you actually got together and just from this D&D game actually came up with a concrete comic book series that has, it looks like something you could just pick up at any comic book shop, and I hope a lot of people are.
And they will be able to soon. So fourth quarter this year, Homebrewed Comics is we've partnered with Filbo Distribution, which is a new distribution company, but they've got some pretty big brands on there. I don't think I'm allowed to talk about it just yet because it's not my, not my company, but there are some pretty big names on the publishing company. And so fourth quarter, we will be available in stores. And I'm very much looking forward to that because we've had distribution before. Um, and it was good. It was good, but it didn't reach the stores that I wanted to reach. And I know now we'll be able to fulfill on time for these stores, and we'll really be able to grow like the retail end of the reader base because not every reader goes to Kickstarter. Not every reader knows how to find indie comics. So I'm really excited to be able to bring Crit to a broader audience.
What's your long-term plan for the series? Is it going to be a set number of issues, or is it going to keep going as long as you can keep them on paper?
So I actually it ends with issue 42.
Nice
So
number.
that if you get the reference, then we're friends.
Hmm,
Um,
hmm.
but it just I never really 100% like when I first came up with the concept of everything. I didn't mean for it to just be 42 issues, but um then I did. So I was like, oh well, um, you know, I I really like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and um, we were playing, like I said, we were getting into our fifth year, and I already knew kind of where the end game would be for the story, so I just started, mapping out the issues and things, and 42 kind of hit. And there's going to be a couple side stories that happen. Like, and I can give this away because it'll probably be a couple years till I even get this book printed. But there is an issue that will come out where it's them fighting this, big giant robot in Japan. Um, it's a Gundam gone wrong kind of situation, and they have to fight the robot. And we get through the issue, and mind you, there's going to be another artist that does this. I've already spoken to them. We've got a plan. I'm getting the script actually starting to work on it now because I want this book in my back pocket just to drop. Um, but at the end, I'm going to be drawing the last few pages and it's crit and they're watching a movie of themselves and they're complaining because they're not getting any residuals off this. And because that actually happened, we played this. I let one of the players DM one day, and he just we were already planning on being in Japan for the story. And I said, hey, like it would be fun to swap. I'll let you DM. I have a player character, so we subbed the characters out, and he was DMing, and of course he put us in Japan with a big giant robot, and it was going to be like a throwaway game just to give me a break from DMing for a little bit, and we had a lot of fun with it. And we're like, well, how does this even fit? Because none of it really fit into the story. But we talked and we're like, well, maybe it's like a crit movie or something. And like they're actors in it. And I'm like, well, it'd actually be even more funny if I have somebody else draw it, because then it's not the same like look.
Okay, I get that. That's really clever.
And then it's like, because when someone else draws, right, or someone else designs the character, it doesn't matter if you give them the exact template, they're going to change something. And when you watch a movie, like the suits never exactly look like the comic book.
Mhm.
And so I thought it'd just be really funny to have somebody else draw it, and then at the very end they're complaining because, oh, my suit doesn't look like that, and it's all the little like bickering, and it's like, oh my, like that actor, he just didn't even nail the part right, like just those kind of conversations. And to me, it would just add to the meta, and it'd be funny, and it it kind of like not knocks on the idea of having a guest artist, but it's like kind of like acknowledging the difference in the look and feel, and we get to keep the story without it hurting the overall like story arc that we're in.
That is really cool. I like that idea a lot. And there's always, to me, it's fun when you can add some meaning to the art style within a comic. And sometimes you just have so many artists working on a character that it's just a matter of necessity. But when there's a certain, when you can actually convey something specifically just by having a certain style, I love that. And that's what makes comics its own medium. It's what makes it different than literary books, different than movies, different than TV. That's what it brings to the table.
Yeah, I get asked a lot, like, why did I go comic books? Because there's so many different mediums to tell something in, and comic books gives you so many different aspects. You get the visual aspect, like the design of the character, the feel of the character is just all there in your initial design. And then you get the written word, so you can kind of tell and show, but also you get these gaps in between panels where the reader gets to really fill in what happens in their head. And really, if you think about Dungeons and Dragons, it all happens in your head. So bringing in that aspect of imagination to the storytelling um, is a lot of fun, because people will put the pieces together differently, no matter how you tell the story, how visually and written. Someone will always have a different version because, oh, I pictured it going this way.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, you mentioned before that's going to be 42 issues. I just want to let you know there's the release schedule of this show is that anybody who has not been on the show before, if you are a new guest, your episode will drop on a Thursday.
Okay.
That's not by accident.
You may have to remind me of what the Thursday means, because
Because nobody's ever gotten the hang of Thursdays.
I'm going to Google this name.
Oh, it's from Hitchhiker because the Earth was destroyed on a Thursday and
Thank you.
Arthur's. Yep, yep.
I was sitting in my head and I'm like, wait, I know the reference, but I don't know the reference in the movie. I remember the Thursday piece. I actually don't even. I'm not going to even spoil anything here, because my girlfriend will listen to this, and I'm making her watch this week, because it's been about, I want to say, 9 or 10 years since I've actually watched it. I made my kid and I watched it. Have you read the book?
Yes.
Okay, because a lot of people haven't read the book and they don't get the movie and why it's so cool.
Hmm.
But that's a whole show by itself.
Yeah, I mean, and there are people who aren't super big fans of the movie, but I am because it's not perfect, but what is, right?
It doesn't have to be. It's just fun sci-fi.
Yes, exactly. And fun sci-fi needs to happen. It needs to be something that exists without needing to be anything else, just fun.
Exactly. Exactly. Like you don't need anything else except for and I, I'm a huge, sci-fi fan. Most things, in fact, most recently, I finally broke down and started getting into the lore of Warhammer because it's just grim, dark fantasy. Um, and I think all sci-fi has this interesting piece for me. I grew up loving Star Wars and got into, you know, Dune, which is kind of cool because my kid loves Dune too, and she's like 15. And when she's like, "Oh, I like Dune," I was like, "Okay, well, we need to sit down and we need to watch the original."
Mhm.
Um, but like I love sci-fi, and as much as I love superheroes and stuff, I've always been a much like a bigger sci-fi fan, and so um for me, like there are a lot of sci-fi elements that come into crit as the story progresses. um but I don't like to ham fist everything, and I don't like shoving everything down someone's throat to begin with, because like issue one, I could have gone into all the lore, the backstory, and done what I see like some indie writers do, which is they have all these. I mean, realistically, if you've been working on a title for a long time or you've been mulling this over in your head, you have all this awesome lore and you have all this awesome backstory and you have this awesome character or characters. And for you, you just want to get it out. So your first issue is nothing but info dump after info dump. And you wind up like overwhelming the reader because there's too much. Um, and maybe it doesn't make sense because it is so much, or you don't get to flesh certain ideas out so they don't make sense. And so with Crit, another reason why it's 42 issues, aside from the fact that um, I like the number 42 and that we played for 5 years, but because I really want all of the elements to have time to breathe. And I could have said in the first issue, this is an Arthurian tale, and King Arthur shows up sometime, and then everyone's going to be sitting there going, "Well, I don't get it." Um, and now we get to bring him in, and the when they really explain everything, it's like, oh, we he exists, and like just like the first issue, it's like, oh, they have powers, but even they don't really understand where they came from. Even though I, as the writer, could tell you everything, and I could put it in like narration. This happened, and this happened, and this happened. But I like the idea of you, or the reader understanding the story just as the players do. Um, and honestly, being a DM for these five guys, it it made me tell a story, because I had to keep them coming back every month. I had to keep the story interesting enough for them to want to play in this setting. And my first run, my first game, I did all the things wrong. I gave them all the information and we did all this stuff. And Brad, he's a until I started DMing, he was a lifelong DM. He's like, "You're doing too much. You're giving us too much. Let us give us like the breadcrumbs and then let us run with it." He said, because what happens is our imagination starts to fill in some of those gaps. And then the story isn't just something we're a part of, it's something that we're actually able to affect. And he said, so because I used to spend a week prepping for a game, I knew point A, point B, C. I knew everything that they were going to do. And essentially, because I wanted it to happen so bad, they felt like it was on rails. And I could tell they were losing interest because they weren't really affecting it. So when I stepped back and I just said, hey, here's the situation. What do you do? Not giving a whole big narration and all these different things. I just said, hey, this is what's going on. How do you handle that? They just started running with it and things started changing and we got what we have now because I, instead of lore dumping and info dumping and controlling everything, gave them breadcrumbs. And so when we started going into the comic book realm, even though I could have narration that explains things, I went in the same direction of just giving some breadcrumbs and really my focus, especially for issues, 0 through 5, the focus was getting you invested in the character, because it's a character driven story, and they're interesting. It's a team, so it's not going to be one issue that I can do just to get you interested in my team. I've got to have multiple issues so you can see their personalities and how they interact with each other, and how each one's a little bit different, and how, like, I'll have someone say, I love how you draw Spectre because he's always laid back. He's always kind of like hunched a little bit or this and that. It's like, well, that's how Austin is in real life. That's how he would be if this were a real situation. And I love how you always have, Caliber moving his hands. You wouldn't pick that up in just one issue. Over 5 issues, you see that Caliber's very, you know, talk with his hands, and Boulder's very expressionate, and that's how they are in real life. So, I wanted you to get a feel for these characters and understand them before we go into the bigger world building and lore things, because if you're not invested in the characters by the time I start building the world, I'm going to lose you, because, like, look at, I'll use Star Wars. It gets you invested in the characters very quickly. Like out the gate, I just, heck, the first time I saw Han Solo, I'm like, man, I like this dude, you know? And if you weren't invested in a character or a couple different characters, why are you going to come back for 3 movies? You know? So why am I going to have you come back for 42 issues if I can't get you invested in my characters? And I might be biased because they're my friends, but I think I have cool characters. And so I wanted the story first and foremost to let them breathe, let them grow before we started doing these big, world building elements. Um, you know, I go to issue 6 because it's the first book where um they're on their own. They've kind of, and by issue 6, they've learned enough about the world around them to say, hey, like, we don't know who to trust. We're going to do our own thing. And in true D&D fashion, you give your characters a choice of, like, okay, so you've got some money built up, you've got some things you want to do. What do you guys, how are you going to, fund your activities and your all your superheroing? How are you going to fund that? And the first answer I get, we're going to open a coffee shop, because, that's the most lucrative thing I guess they could think of at the time. And they wanted coffee. So we open up a coffee shop. Well, who's going to run the coffee shop? We'll just let the cat run the coffee shop. All this is in the book. You'll see it. And, you know, we bring them into the bigger world around them. And the first thing they do is argue over, um, how they give bad customer service. And that's just one of the elements of the team, is they're always bickering and fighting. But then the call comes, they have to go save the day, and they run out and they do it, of course, leaving the talking animals to serve coffee all day. um and in this, setting, you're still following them and following their journey as they fight, robots and other things. But while we're going and you're experiencing that, they're getting little bits of bigger world stuff and lore dumps from, like, emails they read, or, conversations they have with someone. We don't have these lengthy paragraphs of what's going on. And I feel like for me, that's the fun part, because it gives me that Saturday morning cartoon feel. Like when I used to watch He-Man, it was just 20 minutes of He-Man fighting, whatever element was going on in Eternia. And then, like, they didn't tell you everything all at once, mainly because it was also, just trying to sell you toys. Maybe one day I'll go that route. But um, you know, we're entering into this 8th, 9 issue of Crit. We have an issue 0, and since I've been talking so long, I should probably drop this. Issue 0 is free to download on the website, so you can, review that and see if Crit's your thing. But by the time we hit this issue with King Arthur, this is my big world building lore, I don't want to say exposition, because there is a lot more than just info dump, but you learn about this bigger element the same way they do. And I really want the story to always be a vehicle for you to see through the player's eyes, because you didn't get to play the game with us. You didn't get to sit there at the table, but I still want you to have that same experience like they did.
Awesome. And I want to give people the chance to see that. So let's go back to that website for a minute. First of all, where is the website? Because it's going to be located on the show notes of my website, aaronbossick.com. So let's link to that.
It's homebrewedcomics.com.
And I'm going to make sure there's a special link straight to issue 0 so they can start to get that download, check this out.
Cool. Thank
Where
you.
can people follow your adventures on the web and support your Kickstarter?
So I'm at Homebrewed Comics on Instagram. That's probably like the most active for Crit. Now, Homebrewed Comics, we do have other titles as well. We've got Caspian Porter, which is written by Drew, and then Dan has Bigfoot Knows Karate, and we just recently brought in Dennis, who does Celestial Knight. So there are other books on the site. And after my campaign, actually 2 weeks after Crit launches, we are launching the 3rd issue of Bigfoot Knows Karate. And then 2.5 weeks later, we're doing actually Caspian Porter versus Celestial Knight. So, we have a lot. The company itself has a lot in the works. Crit kind of kicks off the Kickstarter season. So while you're there on the website, definitely download your free issue of Crit Zero, or Crit Zero. And then make sure you click the notifications for all the books, because one thing that I love about independent comics is that you get to do your own thing. But I will say one of the hardest things about indie comics is that you're doing your own thing. And for the first 4 years, I was essentially doing everything by myself. I write the books. I would storyboard everything. I would draw them. Some of the books I color, some of them, I've hired colorists, which is why we use Kickstarter. And then I letter them as well. I put them together and I send them off to the printer. So like most of the work is on me. And now that I have the team of the 4 of us, Drew helps with getting us onto Drive Through Comics and Comixology and all these sites. Because we're on Amazon and Barnes and Noble too. And Dan is really taking up the marketing aspect of everything. Dennis will be doing a Whatnot store for us. And so we're all working together, which in indie comics can be hard to find, a solid group of people that you trust. So now, the 4 of us with Homebrewed are able to grow together and kind of bear the weight as a team instead of as individuals. So, we have quite a lot of stuff in the pipeline. We've got plans through 2026 right now for releases. And that's not something that's very common to see in a lot of indie comics. You don't see 2 and 3 year plans. You also don't see a lot of people that are past the 2nd or 3rd issue, because creating comics is hard. But luckily, I think kind of altogether we're upwards of almost 22 issues between all the books. So you can dive in, check out sci-fi, superheroes. You got a cape book, and your and Bigfoot Knows Karate. I mean, that book kind of tells you what it is right out the gate.
It
So
does what it says in the tin.
it tells you what it is right there.
Yeah.
You got no questions. But there's just a lot to offer on the site. We've also got merch like t-shirts and things too, so check those out if you want, and just make sure to check out the Kickstarter, because the big thing that for me is this is my 5th year. This is Homebrewed's 5th year. This is Crit's 5th year, and for the anniversary I actually recolored issue 1. And so I it's a complete redo of issue 1. The coloring and the lettering is updated. And the end of issue 5, I had a friend of mine that came in and helped with issue 5, and great guy, but he was going through a lot, and the art was a little bit rushed, and I wasn't very happy with it. And so this year I got Robert Nix, who does a lot of my covers, a phenomenal artist. He offered to redo the last 8 pages there. And so we're re-releasing issue 5 with updated art and issue 1 with a brand new cover and interior work. And I will say that issue 1 is the only cover I've ever done. I don't do a lot of cover art for my book. So issue 1 now is 100% me, aside from some coloring effects. I had Nestor Radula come in and do a lot of my shading and things. I did the flats, but I just trying to do 3 books at once was a lot of work. So he said he'd help me out. So you're getting, in this Kickstarter, you can literally pick up with a brand new issue 1 all the way through issue 8 and get what I feel is like this really awesome story of friends, of, you know, sci-fi elements, superhero elements. We hit a lot of spots because with having 5 people affect a story, you get 5 different influences. You get sci-fi, you get anime, you know, you get the grim dark world of Warhammer. You have some stuff, some of that stuff in there. And so what I love about Crit is that there's so many different influences that, to me, and the feedback that I get from people that read it, they're always finding something different that they're into, or something that they're connecting with. Like having a cat that you know, smokes cigars and drinks rum. That's one of the big draws. Is I get everyone, oh, how's the cat? Do you really have a cat that smokes cigars and drinks rum? Nope. I'm pretty sure I'd get arrested if I did, but he's in the book.
Well, Chris, I want to thank you so much for doing this. I hope everybody checks out this Kickstarter. I will make it as easy as possible through the show notes there. And you are welcome to come back anytime. I hope I see you at a convention sometime.
We're doing Heroes Con in North Carolina. I'm staying in North Carolina this year. So I've got IshCon, which is a big toy con that I got invited to. Really excited for that. That's May 16th and 17th, or no, 17th, 18th. And then we got Heroes Con, which is the weekend, I believe, after Father's Day this year. And then I've got NC Comic Con at the end of the year. So I'm trying to fill summer right now. I have a couple months where I'm looking, you know, Virginia, South Carolina area. So, you know, I'd love to, and next year I want to do Baltimore. So I don't know what cons you go to, but hopefully we can meet up sometime. That'd be awesome.
That would be cool. And we might do a recording right there at the convention.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
Love that.
I'll see you then.
Cool. Thank you.